Good evening, it's Jade Simmons here, your only truly independent candidate in the 2020 presidential elections. Welcome back for number 2 of our daily debriefing. As promised, I'd be bringing you almost daily briefings. It's been daily so far. Late night briefings that allow me to spend the day collecting the news that I think you need to hear unfiltered. And also it allows me a chance to bring you my viewpoints, my vision of the world, and how I see you in it. I think over the next few months, it's going to be imperative that you get to know how I understand the world and how I understand you being in the world and what I understand leadership to be for this nation. So welcome back. Make sure you share this with people who've been curious about this candidacy in particular. If you're wanting to learn more about who we are, it's operationrestoration2020.com. That's where you're going to find out more information about myself, Jade, why I'm running in the first place, and the core beliefs that I'm running on. Most easily put, it's easy to say that I am running because I believe that we have not reached our potential when it comes to finally and truly becoming one nation, under God, indivisible. You'll hear me say over and over that I feel like it is time to restore the fabric of this nation that has been ripped to shreds, unfortunately, by rampant division. And that division, I'll keep saying it until you hear it, has been profitable for those in power. It's been profitable for the retention of power. Keeping us divided as Americans is good for business where politics is concerned. I believe that instead of watching two sides fight relentlessly, we should be seeing our leaders fight for us, fight for our good. So I'll spend some time recapping some things that happened today. I want to give you hopefully a fresh perspective of how to see things. And then hopefully you'll also be able to start to understand where I'm coming from and why I believe we need representation from what I believe is the muted middle. These are people like you and I who are really tired of the heightened rhetoric. We no longer are comfortable hunkering behind party lines. If you've been like me, you've been independent for a long time. You vote on both sides of the aisle. You vote based on what you feel is best for the country as a whole. And that's becoming more and more difficult to do. And we want to make sure that we're not allowing ourselves to be swayed by lopsided agendas. So tonight, I'm proud to say that everything you'll hear me say is my opinion as an independent person, independent candidate, and you will be hard pressed to find me fighting for anybody else's agenda. I come to you with no agenda, but I come to you on a mission. So let's dive right in. I wanted to clear some things up from last night, but first, as promised, I always want to start with good news. You know, good news is so important because we're in a time now where headlines are mostly a stressful thing to take in. So I think the good news is that for once, we are watching our leadership work together. We are watching both sides have to work together, and we're seeing them work together in record time. It's not a common sight, and I would like to believe we can get used to it. So let me stay on the good news for a while before I kind of twist the knife a little bit here. Here's what's important to know. Congress is rushing to provide economic relief. The stimulus package has already passed in the Senate today, and we are excited that by tomorrow, we should see this also passed by Congress. So what that means is they're acting very quickly now, and it's going to be $2 trillion for a stimulus package. What's really great about that, don't take my word for it, do your own research where your own relief is concerned, but we're supposed to be seeing direct payments of $1,200 to American families that are making under $75,000. More of the stipulations are coming out now, so do your own homework. But we're looking at direct payments, $1,200 for most Americans making under $75,000, with more money for those who have children. So you want to check into that for yourself. This also includes $500 billion. That's a loan program for big businesses. But those of you who have been so worried that only big business would be bailed out, you will be happy to hear that $360 billion is also going to small business. And finally, they have increased the number for hospitals, healthcare, state, local governments who are fighting the coronavirus. So here's where I'm still waiting to hear about. I'm still waiting to see what's happening with the self-employed people. I am a small business owner. Not very long ago, I would have qualified simply as a self-employed individual. So here's the thing that we have to believe in as Americans, that as we begin, listen, as we begin to elevate, we don't suddenly forget about the people who are still in the places where we used to be. You see, this is what is so key. This is why we have such a division of wealth, is that people who have also ascended from places, maybe not of complete poverty, but from middle class to upper middle class, from upper middle class to the 1%, we sometimes have a tendency to forget where we came from. And we now start to vote based only on what is good for us. I dare you now to begin to make decisions, not just based on what's good for you and yours, right? But now you make decisions and you vote based on what other people who may not be in the same position of you as you are to help yourself, you vote in a way that's also going to be beneficial to them. I saw someone on Facebook one time give someone advice that when you vote, you look for the issues that are important to you and you look for what's going to help you and your family and you vote that way. I push back on that. Yes, you do need to think about your family, especially if your family is one of those that are in need in a very specific way. But those of us who do have means must also vote in a way that will benefit those that do not have the same bootstrap. Self-reliance is critical, but we must remember that self-reliance is a privilege. Do you know that in some parts of the world, it's a privilege to be able to even be self-reliant? People forget that to be truly self-reliant, somebody probably gave you something along the way. Listen, when people start talking about themselves as being self-made, stop up your ears. There's no such thing. In the first place, somebody had to have you. So you already didn't start out as self-made, right? But I digress. We want to make sure that as we're looking at these things like the stimulus package, as we are looking for how to vote, whether it's the November elections or different propositions that come your way, don't just think about what you need. Dare to think about people who are still in the position you used to be in, or people who are in a position you cannot even imagine. That's going to change so many things about progress and economic growth in our country. But this is supposed to pass through the House. It already went through the Senate. It should go through the House, expected sometime tomorrow. And then it will go to President Trump's desk. And he's already said that he is looking forward to signing it. So we are watching right now what government is supposed to look like. Here's where the knife twist comes in a little bit. I don't have a lot of faith that this camaraderie we're seeing, this emergency camaraderie, is going to last. Why? Because we're in an election year, first and foremost. And second, again, the division itself is actually more profitable to those in power. You will watch both sides begin to position now that as they were toggling back and forth with the stimulus package, you'll see different faces come out front and say very loudly what they didn't like about the package. Not because they're going to fight it that much, but they need their base to know, I'm in here fighting for you. This is still our side. These are the things we wanted. Everybody needs somebody to fight for them. I think the next leader of the country needs to fight with the American people as a whole. I think it needs to come to you with no base other than the nation itself. That is my pledge to you. And so I want us to hold our leaders accountable. If they're cooperating now, why can't they continue to cooperate? This is something that we should demand. So again, I'm keeping my eyes out to see if there are benefits for self-employed. I'm sure there must be some in there. I want to dig a little deeper before I speak on that. I want to clear something up from last night. Wonderful comment last night from Chisholm, who is in the healthcare industry. And she took issue with the fact that I said, look, if you're going to give out bonuses, why not give them to healthcare workers? And she said, listen, Jade, we don't work for bonuses. We work, out of the kindness, out of the goodness of our heart. We're doing this because we believe in serving people. Listen, I think that the people who work not for the reward are the first people that should be rewarded. You understand what I'm saying? The people whose motivation is not the reward should be the first people to be rewarded. And the reason this is last night is because as we watch this stimulus package pass, we have to make sure that when they give these big packages to these big businesses, that down the road, when nobody's watching anymore, That money that was meant to stimulate their business again, to help them pay their workers, is really going to be invested in their workers and not given to the people at the top who already have hugely padded salaries in the first place. That's what happened after the 2008 recession. So you have to be so careful to watch that it doesn't happen again. There are safeguards being put in place this time, which is much more powerful. So let me explain again. When I say bonuses to the healthcare workers, I was talking about money, but not only money. We have to make sure that our healthcare workers have the supplies they need, have the resources they need, have the machinery they need to treat the patients that they would literally treat for free if they could afford to. But here's what we're finding out even today. You've got healthcare workers who are paying out of their own pockets for their medical supplies. They are paying for their own safety gear. Just like in the education world, you've got teachers who are paying out of their own pockets for school supplies for their students. Shouldn't be the case. So if we are going to kick around things like bonuses, why not reward our healthcare workers who are currently overstressed and are being overexposed to the illness itself? I heard from a doctor today who survived the Ebola scare of a few years ago. He actually did catch Ebola while he was treating patients, and he survived that. So he says he really sympathizes with American doctors now who are dealing with this, and that we need to be supporting them to the utmost at this period. So I stand by my comment about bonuses, and Chisholm actually said she now agrees since I explained what I meant. I also think that, we have wonderful, I keep thinking it's Minnesota. I need to look it up to make sure. But in Minnesota, there are college students who have volunteered. They are volunteering their time to take care of the children of healthcare workers for free. That's awesome, but it is not sustainable. So I would love to see bonuses going to healthcare workers so that they can afford extra childcare supplies that they need. And of course, now with the stimulus package, hopefully we are truly funding the resources needed. President Trump was very excited yesterday about 5,000 more ventilators being made. That's awesome. New York alone, though, already says they need more than 30,000. So I think that the next president is going to have to already think in advance about how to pandemic-proof our nation, because this is not going to be a one-time thing. We know that from Ebola, SARS, MERS, and the like. We can go all the way back to the Spanish flu of, I think it was 1918. So epidemics, pandemics are not going anywhere, but our preparedness must increase. All right, the Olympics. I love the Olympics. I was hoping to go this summer to Japan for the Olympics. So it, of course, is disappointing, but not surprising that they canceled. Some of you might be wondering why it took them so long to cancel, because everything else was being canceled. They pretty much knew they were going to do it, but one of the things they had to consider was just the sheer logistics. Now, we'll never know whose arms got twisted in that situation with the IOC, but I do applaud Prime Minister Abe and the IOC for, of course, canceling. But here's what I want you to see what really played out. Yesterday, I talked to you about the importance of shifting our mindset now to a place where we decide that we are always going to prioritize people over profit, people over party when you talk about politics, but with the economy, people over profit. I want you to understand what Japan just did. It cost them, they've already spent close to $28 billion to stage the games. It takes years to begin to build the facilities. So you better believe they were trying to wait this thing out and see if they could still have the games, because they had already invested so much. By deciding to put the games off, they have actually delayed their ability to start making that money back with the tourism that was going to happen, all the people who were going to flood Japan for the games now. They are making a huge sacrifice. Remember last night we talked about the new mindset shift that our nation must make, which is that we have to understand the difference between asking people to make sacrifices and sacrificing people. And I made a hard statement last night. I said that by being unprepared, being caught flat-footed in this epidemic, what we've done is unwillingly sacrificed American lives unnecessarily, unwillingly. Every move we make moving forward now, though, will determine if we are now willingly, knowingly sacrificing people, which leads to, actually, let me cover one more thing with the games here. I always like to give you something to chew on, something that you can go and research for yourself. Those that are just joining, I've been saying that I truly believe that America should be the most informed nation on the planet. We should be the most inspired and the most activated, but we must be the most informed. I've been saying that I've been following coronavirus when it was still coronavirus and not COVID-19, back when there were only 6 deaths. And I never like to use that word only with deaths, because I believe even one unnecessary death is a travesty if it could have been prevented. So we saw this, I've been following this back since there were 6 deaths, watched it go from 6 to about 100 in a matter of days. And so what's wild is to see how we, the US, have been caught standing so flat-footed. And so now every move we make now will determine whether or not we are willingly sacrificing our people and prioritizing profit over our people. But there are a couple issues that I think we'll see that's going to come up with the Olympics being canceled. Number one, just as a former athlete myself, I'm really curious to watch them handle the qualifying rounds. Imagine if you already qualified for the Olympics. Do up-and-comers get to try out for 2021? And if their times are better than yours, will that knock you out? Everybody who's qualified now, they're in tip-top shape. They're ready to compete. They're going to be older in another year. They're going to have to keep up that regimen. You're going to have younger athletes who are coming up behind them, who would have maybe prepared for the next Olympic Games, who may now get a shot to compete early. So we should be watching just to see how they're going to handle that. Because America, again, will host the games. We need to think about these things now, because I do believe that epidemics will begin to be a part of, unfortunate part of our future. And hopefully they won't recur as regularly, but if they do, we'll be more prepared the next time around. I also think that we will see a few other issues that are going to be very controversial. We'll talk about more of those on another issue. But I think you're going to see now, with another year to suspend the games, you're going to see a lot of talk now around transgender issues and being able to compete. There's a landmark case that's happening right now, might be postponed with COVID happening, where people are going to begin to challenge. We're going to have to balance the needs of newly established and recognized people groups with the issue of discrimination and with the rights of traditionally established groups. So you're going to have transgender women who now want to compete in what used to be considered a woman's sport, right? So we're already seeing this, just to play on an interesting discussion now that we're having, even with what's the language that we use. These are things that we as Americans are going to have to deal with, because we're going to have to figure out, how do we stand firm in our beliefs but still show empathy and compassion for those who live or believe differently, but still stand on our beliefs, but still show empathy and compassion. These are going to be things that you're going to want now, a leader who also is able to show understanding, who's also able to show empathy. And you're going to have someone who's willing to also defend whatever the minority will be. You see, even the word minority is shifting in our culture. And so I think that leaders now are going to have a different set of skills than we've seen before. It's not just going to be about winning and about power, but it's also going to be about nuance. It's going to be about the ability to have civic discussion, because things are going to get very controversial. And I can bet you money that you're going to see this issue begin to pop up. So I have on there, what about water? You would think that in the richest country in the world, water wasn't an issue. But do you know that while most of us are just bored out of our minds, either staying at home or anxious wanting to get back to work or dealing with crises in our small businesses, there are people in our country right now that literally have not had running water for the entirety of the COVID-19 epidemic. And so I think we already have to start thinking about, when we talk about having a right to life, an inalienable right to life, does that include water? I'd be curious, those of you that are watching, do you think that water should be a right? It should be a given. We're watching this play out now in Michigan, whose cases are starting to skyrocket. You have people now who have no running water. You have people who are bathing their babies, right, in bottled water or water that they've heated, right, with the space heater, and then they have to wash all of the children in that one tub of water. Absolutely unacceptable for this country. So I'm excited now that we are seeing Michigan, you're seeing other states now and cities begin to either do one of the two things. They're starting to limit water payments to $25 a month, defer old water debts until the health crisis is over. But I think this is going to be a major discussion. I happen to believe that water is a right. And you think of our body being made of, I think, over 70% water. Water is a right. And so especially in these times of crisis, let's say if you don't even believe it's a right, let's say if this sounds like socialism to you, which it is not, here's what we have to consider. I'm speaking from a humanitarian standpoint. Let's speak completely from a selfish standpoint, because that's going to appeal to somebody. I want you to understand this. I speak from a humanitarian standpoint, but let's talk about this from a selfish standpoint. If we are not equipping our most impoverished with the possibility of having the level of hygiene that is needed to combat one of these illnesses, you are also endangering yourself. Do you understand this? When you look at the spread of epidemics, you will see it so often spread more quickly with impoverished populations because of the lack of resources, because of the lack of access to health care. So these are things that are no longer political footballs to punt back and forth. These are real life issues now where people who may not be in the same socioeconomic class as you will affect your quality of life. That's the selfish standpoint. I think just as a human, we should want to make sure that we can provide just a base level of living for every citizen of this nation. And I think water should be included amongst those. I'd be curious to know how many of you do believe that water is a right. But what we're seeing now is what's being called a water affordability crisis. You've heard of a affordable housing crisis, but we're now experiencing a water affordability crisis. And I think the stat says there's like 5% of households, at least in this area in Michigan, that on average had their water shut off. Now, if you apply those numbers across the country, you're going to get somewhere to 15 million people who are without water. Most of the time that's for a few weeks, but you have people who are literally going months and years without water. That's a real issue. All right, I want to end by talking about the problem with Easter. I'm Christian. I love the Easter holiday. It's quickly becoming my favorite, surpassing Christmas in many ways. There's something so powerful when you think about the resurrection. And I do think that the current administration is tying our return to normalcy with that holiday for a reason. I do believe that you're going to start to hear evangelicals talk about the resurrecting of our economy. Just mark my words. You're going to start to hear them use words like that. It's the resurrection of our economy, the resurrection of the American way of life. And look at this. It coincides with the resurrection. That sounds really good. It sounds really good. It makes for a great celebration. It makes for a great story in the history books. But it is not up to us to write the ending we want. We must walk out the story that is being written and use this time, the grace period, to have an ending that is real and that will really work. Here's what we risk. If we just slap down a back to business date on this virus that, first of all, we still don't know what the real life cycle of the virus is. We still don't know how far the virus will spread. We also don't know about reinfection. There have been cases now where people have gotten the virus, been cured of the virus, tested negative of the virus, turned up with the virus again. What we don't know is, did the virus lay dormant in them, come back, or did they get reinfected? This is important information. We need to know these answers before we start moving as if we know what's really going on. So the sound of Easter is really good, but there's a danger now of mixed messages. When one day we're saying this is very serious, stay home, we're shutting down, and the next day we're hearing, don't worry, in 2 weeks we'll be up and running. Many scientists, virologists are calling this a perfect virus because it infects more people than it actually kills. So you're right, the flu kills more, which I hate when people say that. We need to stop saying that. But in numbers wise, the flu kills more. But this virus spreads faster than anything that they're seeing. And the problem with this virus, we have a lot of people saying, let those of us that are healthy go back to work. Let those of us that are sick stay home. Here's the catch. With coronavirus, you don't know who is sick yet. That you can have no symptoms for anywhere from 2 to 10 days. And you can be walking around feeling as healthy as ever and infecting others. If we just slap an arbitrary date on this thing, you could risk having healthy people go back to work and infect truly healthy people, and then cause what's called a resurgence of this. If we're serious about getting the economy up and running, what you don't want to do is have to do 2 bailouts, 2 rounds of checks to people's homes. You don't want to have to do all of this again. If you could hunker down now, really take the time to figure out what's happening. Do it correctly. That means the recovery is a little bit longer, but it's more sustainable. That's what we want. And most doctors and scientists say that we have not seen the worst of this. I said last night, you're not going to find a more positive person. I always see silver linings, and I see the same in this. I see a golden opportunity, even in this quarantine, even as we're home with our families, a golden opportunity to reconnect. What I don't want us to do is mess up the grace we do have now to get this thing right by starting and having a bumpy restart that results in a resurgence. Kudos, I'll end by saying kudos to South Africa, who has not even had one death. And what they've done is they've watched this thing. They've watched it go from China to Iran to Italy to Spain, right? They've watched how certain countries have weathered it better than ours. And they now are watching the US, which has the most confirmed cases in the world. South Africa has completely shut down their nation before even one soul has died. What are they doing? It's already taken a big hit on their economy. What they're saying is, we don't want to go through what everyone else is going through. If we can flatten this curve from the beginning, if we can reduce the number of infected and have all of our testing possibilities available, which is the route that we must take now, is to begin to do mass testing of people who even seem healthy so that we can know for sure who is sick. Those who are sick should be quarantined. And that way, if you want to restart the economy, you can do so with people who have been proven not to be sick. But kudos to South Africa for doing something that is very hard. They've sacrificed on the front end so that their people weren't sacrificed in the end. It's really powerful. I think we can learn from other nations. We don't have to be dependent on other nations, but we should learn from other nations. So I hope that this has informed you in a way that you haven't been informed yet today, but I hope you also feel inspired. I think that as we watch what's going on, there's so much that we're learning about ourselves. I will tell you, it's a double-edged sword how Americans are built. In our DNA is the ability to be a rebel, the ability to move like a maverick. And I think those are wonderful God-given qualities. What we have to be careful about is that that same rebel behavior that caused us to create such an incredible nation doesn't become our downfall because of pride or stubbornness. The stubbornness we should be showing now is a defiance that says we will not be defeated by this because we will do the hard things now in order to have the life that we want. And I will encourage you to stop saying you want to return to normal. We want to elevate to a new normal, which is where I believe this nation is destined to go. That's an era that's more unified than ever before. It's an era that is deciding we should return to being what it looks like to being one nation. And we can be indivisible. And as I always say, with God, all things are possible. So I do believe we should be one nation under God, indivisible. I hope that inspires you, and I hope that you'll learn more about Operation Restoration 2020. Go to thatwebsite.com and you'll find more of the platforms and policies. Stay tuned. April 1st, we're releasing a lot more information, a lot more detail for many of you who've had questions. If you want to get involved, you can do so in many ways. Donate, of course. Press the Get Involved tab and you'll find out about a new volunteer kickoff meeting coming up on April 6th. We're so excited at your response, guys. Thank you so much for your enthusiasm. It is so confirming to hear that what we're doing is necessary, that you feel there should be representation of people who do not feel represented by both of the extremes that we're seeing right now. Or you might not feel like you want to be represented by the status quo. Maybe you just don't want to go back to doing business as usual and you believe that there is more for us as a nation. That excites me to no end. I look forward to sharing more with you in the days ahead. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow night. Have a good night.